Big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Very busy show for you. In the big question, should we double military spending? The chairman of the House of Commons Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, slugs it out live on the programme with former London Mayor Ken Livingston. In the news agenda, do we still need the Commonwealth? And is it wrong to call children fat? We'll discuss that later. We'll debate it with my all-star panel. And in my big opinion, the BBC star attacking a GB News presenter. Why has that happened? Find out in 2 minutes' time. First up, here are the headlines.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Miranda Shunker in the GB newsroom. A joint game plan to reduce Europe's dependency on Russian energy has been announced by President Joe Biden. The US will provide the European Union with at least 15 billion additional cubic metres of liquefied natural gas by the end of the year. A spokesman for the Ukrainian president says he's disappointed by the NATO summit and was expecting more bravery from world leaders. The comments come as Ukrainian forces reportedly are in control of the besieged port city of Mariupol. Ukraine's top security official says they're holding on and no one will surrender. Meanwhile, Russia claims the first phase of its military operation in Ukraine is almost complete. The Defence Ministry says it's now focusing on the country's breakaway Donbass region, which includes Luhansk and Donetsk. The US has described it as a negotiating tactic. In other news, the jury in the murder trial of Sir David Amess has been shown the suspect's police interviews. In the video, Ali Harbi Ali was heard calmly describing how he carried out the attack. The court's been told the 26-year-old stabbed the Conservative MP 21 times in October last year. He has denied murder and the preparation for terrorist acts.
We have been informed that you made a significant comment following your arrest, where you have made the comment, "It was terrorist." Is that correct?
I think I said, what's it called? The nature of the crime I said is terror.
Mr. Ali, is this a terrorist attack?
I mean, I guess, yeah, I killed an MP and I've done it. Yeah.
Okay.
2 men and a teenage girl have been given life sentences for killing a father of 2 in Cardiff. Jason Edwards, Lee Strickland and Dion Timms Williams murdered Gary Jenkins in July last year. The prosecution says the attack was motivated by greed, homophobia and violence. A man who murdered his ex-girlfriend's 2-year-old son has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 25 years. Kamar Brown and the child's mother, Felicia Shirley, abused Kyrell Matthews for weeks, leaving him with multiple rib fractures and internal injuries. Brown was convicted of murder, while Shirley was found guilty of manslaughter and jailed for 13 years. And talks between union officials and P&O Ferries over the sacking of almost 800 workers have ended without agreement. The Rail, Maritime and Transport Union says the obnoxiousness and hostility of the company was on display during the 20-minute meeting. The union is urging the government to force P&O Ferries to reinstate its members. Well, on TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
The brilliant Miranda Shunker returns in an hour's time. It's Friday, March the 25th, and you are watching and listening to Mark Dolan Tonight. A jam-packed 2 hours for you, a heady mix of entertainment and debate. You won't want to miss a second. Remember, we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. In the big question, should we double military spending? Yes, says the chairman of the House of Commons Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood. And no, says former London Mayor Ken Livingston. They both join me live shortly. Ken Livingston is going to stick around for Mark Meets tonight, and he'll tell me why he got into politics, what it was like being London Mayor, and whether Labour can ever win a general election again. In the news agenda, is it wrong to call children fat? Does the Commonwealth still matter? Do we need it? And your run-ins with wild animals. Plus my alternative news headlines tonight featuring Chancellor Rishi Sunak. He's had a bit of stick after his spring statement. Well, who said his fuel policy isn't helping out the working class? More of that in my alternative headlines just after 10. But wait, there's more. Another great British game show tonight, great gangsters from film and TV. And you know that the best bit of my show is when I hear from you. So drop me a line throughout the programme, mark@gbnews.uk. Helping steer me through all of this, it will be a busy 2 hours. The fantastic columnist and author Tony Parsons. A very good friend of mine, David Olroyd-Boat. And journalist and broadcaster Nina Mishkov. So excited to have all three of them. One day we'll get a camera on them. So get the kettle on, folks. We've got work to do, and we'll start with this. It's really strange. People who don't like us seem to talk about us non-stop. The talented TV presenter and columnist Victoria Coren Mitchell, host of the BBC game show Only Connect, responded to a clip on GB News of the presenter Leo Kearse doing what he's famous for, biting political satire. Take a look.
This is reported in the Daily Mail and the Independent. So Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, which is Iranian for ungrateful.
She certainly split the room, hasn't she?
Yeah, she has. She has. And, so she had this press conference, had a right old go at the British government for spending, like, what was it, £400 million to get her back?
She's supposed to be a charity worker.
Iranian for ungrateful, spicy stuff. Well, here is Coren Mitchell's response. She tweeted the following. Take a look at this. Comedy is the greatest art form. Freedom is vital to it, like oxygen to plants, and more power to your elbow in future. That's my piece on this, and I'm done. Except to say, earlier, and we'll get the tweet up, she accused the clip of being racist. That's right, she accused the clip of being racist. Very confusing. If you don't like a clip, why would you share it and therefore amplify its audience? This dreadful clip, to which Mrs. Coren Mitchell takes such offence, has now been viewed by almost 500,000 people. Things I don't like, I ignore and avoid. I wouldn't want a single extra person to see things that I don't like, let alone 500,000. So what would motivate sharing a clip that you don't like? Why would you do that? Crumbs, I wonder if it's because you've got a virtue signal that you've got to give to your army of followers. Look at this terrible video, isn't it awful? And aren't I a lovely person by sharing it and saying it's awful? It is a signal, surely. Like so much on social media, it's a message about you and about your brand. But the message it sends to me is that this satirical programme, in the case of Headliners, which I host every Friday, Saturday and Sunday, is something that shouldn't exist. Now, she went on to actually speak on behalf of Simon Evans with this puzzling tweet. Simon is one of the other presenters of this particular show. Also interesting that you can see in the eyes of Simon Evans that he knows this conversation is idiotic and beneath him, and that he's visiting from another planet and slightly regretting it. So according to her, Simon Evans doesn't want to be there and he regrets being on the show. Well, here is Simon's response. Utterly baseless accusations of racism dismantled by Nick Dixon. I've said this before, but while there is still witless slander of this sort flying around, I'll keep saying it. I'm proud of that show. Who knew? So the message, perhaps, is that Leo Kearse shouldn't be doing what he does, which is to be excruciatingly and hilariously brutal about all public figures. He had bloody Lembit Opik in tears the other day, which has got to be one for the bucket list. The message from Victoria Coren Mitchell might even suggest that GBNews shouldn't exist if it's publishing this disgraceful content. I don't know. She even questioned why it was a clip, therefore taking aim at the talented young team in our social media department. In a lengthy follow-up tweet, which I didn't fully read because I was washing my hair, Mrs. Coren Mitchell reaffirmed her commitment to comedy. Let's take another look at that tweet. So she's obviously all about freedom of speech, but she has then gone on to defend Jimmy Carr. And this is in a previous tweet. Whilst I'm here, might I take a moment to mention I also love Jimmy Carr, a close friend who's made about 1,000 jokes I wouldn't make myself as a stage performer. But as a man, he's full of goodness and kindness. He's a properly decent person. Well, of course, we know he was notorious for a certain joke, which we'll get to shortly. Now, this is very interesting. Lots of tweets came in from members of the audience who had a look at what the tweet said. I don't agree with much of what Leo said, but you're going to have to point out the racist comments to me, please. Headliners is an excellent programme and slurs are just plain wrong. Throwing around the term racist and racism for basically criticising someone is also lazy. We can go into the rights and wrongs of the British government's handling of this poor woman's 6-year prison term. Our own Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, whilst Foreign Secretary, wrongly claimed that she was a journalist. He also wrongly claimed that he was a journalist once too. I'm personally delighted that Nazanin is home. It's taken far too long. She's a hero, her husband is a hero, and I believe it was right to pay the money. But during her first press conference, when she interrupted and challenged her husband for praising the British government, within minutes, ungrateful Nazanin was trending on Twitter, something that Leo Kearse picked up on and turned into a joke. Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe is Iranian for ungrateful. He was responding to some public criticism that she might have condemned her captors more and more fulsomely thanked the British government and therefore the British people for parting with almost £500 million to secure her release. £400 million is no small sum in these straitened times. So it's fair journalistic comment to question what some perceive to have been a tone-deaf response from her. And it's fair comedic comment too, because the last time I checked, you are allowed to joke about anything in this country and have an opinion. Mrs. Coren Mitchell famously and rightly defended free speech in relation to Jimmy Carr's joke. I've just quoted you her comments there. His joke was about gypsies being slaughtered in the Second World War. So a joke about gypsy murder isn't racist, but a joke saying Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe is Iranian for ungrateful is. It doesn't add up. The truth is that whilst neither of these jokes are ones that I would say, neither Jimmy Carr or Leo Kearse's jokes were racist, just harsh, satirical and edgy, a quality boasted by some of the finest comedians out there. Mrs. Coren Mitchell claims to be such a cheerleader for free speech and comedy from her tax-funded ivory tower at the BBC. But she makes a potentially highly damaging accusation against a comedian who has finally achieved a television platform, having spent a decade being cancelled for having centre-right politics. In the end, I defer to the greater wisdom of the brilliant Jewish comedian Josh Howie, who has used his platform to speak out against the appalling evil of anti-Semitism and who tweeted this earlier in the week. Probably the last comic who needs someone to stand up for them is Leo Kearse, but this thread by Victoria Coren Mitchell is maddeningly disingenuous and would take a longer and even more boring thread to pull apart. The fact is, Leo's joke is not racist and Victoria should apologise. Now, of course, anyone has a right to tweet any accusations they like, and there's no problem with Leo Kearse facing a response to any of his jokes. It's good for him. His ego's big enough as it is. But it's important to understand what's at play here, and I believe it's cancel culture. Leo's jokes don't fit with the woke North London metropolitan agenda. Mrs. Corin Mitchell is married to the equally talented comedy actor David Mitchell, who, surprise, surprise, has had a pop at me in his Guardian column. There's the article. I've got to say, it was a cracking read. The Prosecco-guzzling elite want to silence Leo. They want to silence me. They want to silence GBNews. And therefore, they want to silence you. It's the same people in America who want to silence Joe Rogan, a free speech comedian who says what's in his head, who's authentic, and has now amassed 11 million listeners a week. That's all for his podcast. Why do they listen? Well, not because all of them agree with what he's saying, but because they find him authentic. They don't feel lied to or bullshitted. Now, we're passionate about telling you the truth here at GB News. We say it like it is. We'll get it right, we'll get it wrong. Us GB News presenters don't even agree with each other, and that's the magic of the place. I'm a current affairs broadcaster and a comedian, but I use this medium and live comedy to the same ends, which is to debate everything, ask questions, challenge the status quo, and ruffle a few feathers. Any broadcaster or comedian that isn't a disruptor, that doesn't ask questions, may as well pack up and go home, which is why safe box-ticking comedy is so tedious. Viewing figures for comedy shows like Live at the Apollo have gone through the floor as a result. Go woke? No joke. By all means, have woke, politically correct comedy, but let it compete with edgy comedy, the likes of which John Cleese, Billy Connolly and French and Saunders are all on record as saying they would not be able to do now. I'm a big fan of Victoria Corin Mitchell, and this isn't personal, but she made it personal by attacking another comic for having a different view and by using the R word. Racism is the most evil thing imaginable and a colossal problem in our society which must be tackled. But for a powerful entertainer with a big platform to use the R word in this context diminishes the horror of what racism is. But that's the punishment you get for not going along with the narrative, for not following the rules of the echo chamber. All dissenters will be crushed in the Church of Woke, which is why the Church of Woke must not be crushed necessarily, but at least brought to its knees. Personal attacks and putting labels on people just to silence them is no laughing matter. Reacting to that story and all of the big news stories of the day, I'm delighted to welcome Tony Parsons, columnist and author, political commentator David Oldroyd-Boat, and journalist Nina Mishkov. If I could start with you, David, your reaction to accusations that what Leo Kearse had to say was racist.
Well, it's clearly not racist. I think it would have been funnier as a joke if you got the name of the language right. It's Farsi, not Iranian. But let's leave that one aside. It's not racist. And I think Victoria Corin's falling into a trap here, forgive me, Corin Mitchell, falling into a trap here that a great many do of the liberal left, which is if our sort of person makes a joke, for instance, her brother, the Times columnist Giles Corin, who's often made jokes in his columns that are extremely close to the bone. But if it's our sort of person making that joke, it's fine. However, if someone who has a different political opinion from me, who comes from a different part of the political spectrum, makes a joke, then there must be cancellation and there must be contrition, and that person must admit that that was the gravest sin that you could ever possibly commit. I think the use of the word racist as this sort of weapon against people who simply disagree with you about matters of economics or home affairs, for instance, is lazy.
Nina Mishkov, use of the R word is just a way of shutting people down. It's got nothing to do with worrying about racism itself.
I think it does have a viewpoint in worrying about racism, and you can say that in its most basic terms that saying it's Ukrainian is for ungrateful or equivalent. I mean, what I take issue with is the word ungrateful. I mean, I think that's absolutely outrageous to call her ungrateful. I mean, what was she supposed to be? Some sort of, poor little woman saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. A ransom was not paid. It was not a ransom. It was a debt that the British government had owed for 50 years, and it had to be paid at some time. Now, it's taken all these years, 5 foreign secretaries, to get her out of prison, while promising all sorts of things, and not forgetting that Boris Johnson screwed it up in the middle by not being on top of the game and just blowing it all to shreds. So why should she be touchingly grateful? And the thing is, she cannot castigate her captors, because that's probably part of the deal that was struck when she left. Because don't forget, there are still other people in jail that are being held by the regime, and anything that she says against the regime can only mean bad news for them. So I will absolutely defend to the last for every word she said on camera.
Well, of course, and I agree with you on that, Nina, but doesn't a comedian have a right to pick up on the fact that on Twitter, minutes after that press conference, the expression Nazanin ungrateful was trending? He made a joke about it. That's his job.
I agree that's his job, but it's also Victoria Coren-Mitchell's job to pick up on things that she politically does not agree with.
Well, I agree with that, but you can't call it racist, because that's a way of cancelling people, and it discredits the evil essence of racism. If we start labelling nations and labelling people as one thing or the other, that is the root to racism. It is absolutely the root and the key to racism. You are this, you are that, you're different from me, I don't agree with you. And just bringing it down to names, say, is entirely wrong. What do you think about this, Tony Parsons?
I couldn't see anything racist about it, what he said. I understand why she was upset, because Victoria's been involved in the campaign. She's been down to see the husband when he was in his hunger strike. I could understand why she would feel defensive towards a woman who she campaigned for and she cared about. I think a lot of us found Nazanin's tone odd when she was at that press conference, when she you would never guess that it was actually the Iranians who had locked her up rather than the British government. I agree with Nina. I think the debt should have been paid a long time ago, and I think it's tragic that she was used as a pawn in this game. And I think it was an unforgivable cock-up by Boris when he dropped her deeper in it than she was already. But I think that, you know, we have to get over this playing the race card, thinking you can shut down anyone by accusing them of being racist. I think that has to stop.
We're going to come back to this. Lots of emails coming in as we speak. Janet says, "Hi, Mark, right on. The word racism is overused. Thanks for your wonderful commentary." That's an email from Janet, watching live in Canada. Ronald says, "Hi, Mark, as usual, a fantastic monologue and looks like a super panel, especially Nina. I'm going to enjoy the next 2 hours." Well, we're going to enjoy the next 2 hours as well. How about this from Kevin? "Mark, that was a masterful rebuttal of the accusation of racism against Leo Kearse. Superbly well presented. Excellent work." Well, Kevin, thank you so much. If you disagree, do drop me a line, mark@gbnews.uk. But we're going to hear it from the horse's mouth, because Leo Kearse is next. See you shortly. This is GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Since I was first on.
GB News presenter Leo Kearse very shortly. So many emails coming in on the issue of Iran. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, was she ungrateful? I'm personally so happy that she's home. However, I do wonder about the tone of that press conference, which was picked up on by comedian Leo Kearse. Shane says, hi, Mark. She should be grateful, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. Remember, Iran sees her as an Iranian, just as the Chinese see all Chinese people in the UK as Chinese. So she should count her lucky stars that the UK came into her life at any point. Well, look, those are strong views. Of course, Nazanin is a British citizen as well as holding Iranian citizenship, but it is all about opinions. Do keep them coming. Russell says, hi, Mark. Brilliant start to the programme. Nazanin was ungrateful, and I support the hashing. There was absolutely nothing wrong with what Leo said, and that continues in that spirit. I agree, Anne says. Nazanin could not criticise the Iranian government, but she shouldn't criticise the UK government. Leo is not racist, and that's from Annie. Well, look, lots more to come, and Leo with us shortly. But it's time now for the big question. And look, we'll get to this, but in just one moment, because a man who is arguably forcing us to have it is again in the news, fighting a different type of battle. Vladimir Putin has now likened himself to J.K. Rowling, of all people. He said J.K. Rowling was cancelled because she, a writer of books that have sold millions of copies around the world, didn't please fans of so-called gender freedoms. He carried on to say, they're now trying to cancel our country. I'm talking about the progressive discrimination of everything to do with Russia. Not sure that's exactly the same thought, Vlad, and J.K. Rowling doesn't think so either. She tweeted, critiques of Western cancel culture are possibly not best made by those currently slaughtering civilians for the crime of resistance or who jail and poison their critics. Hashtag I stand with Ukraine. Quite a burn there from the world's greatest living author. OK, back to me. It's time now for the big question, in which we tackle a major news story of the day from multiple points of view. Tonight, given the threat to the West of global terror, an increasingly belligerent North Korea, a China agitating for expansion, and with Russian tanks running amok in Ukraine, should Britain double its defence spending? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome the chairman of the House of Commons Defence Select Committee and Conservative MP for Bournemouth East, Tobias Ellwood, and former Labour London Mayor Ken Livingston. Great to have both of you with me. First of all, Tobias, do you think we should double our spending on military in this country?
A short answer is yes. The world is getting more dangerous. We've entered an era of huge insecurity, and Britain has always played an important role in using our hard power wisely to defend international standards and values. I think we've enjoyed 30 years of relative peace. There's clearly been the insurgency issue, which has been very serious. But this is the first time in decades that we're dealing with state-on-state aggression. And when we look at the details of where this could take us in the next couple of decades, it's very clear that our armed forces will be overstretched. The last defense review saw some swathing cuts to our manpower, to our tanks, to our armored fighting vehicles, to our ships, indeed to our aircraft as well. And we can't do all the heavy lifting. There's no chance of all that. But if we want to play an influential role on the international stage, particularly when we see America perhaps hesitating a bit in the European theatre of interest, then absolutely we need to look carefully at increasing defence spending.
Ken Livingston, the world is an increasingly dangerous place, multiple threats. We're going to have to spend a bit more money to make ourselves a bit safer.
We're not under threat. The simple fact is Britain spends more on its military than the rest of Western Europe. You look at Germany, it spends 2% of its GDP on the military. We spend 3%. And the simple fact is, the West should stand up to Putin. Putin is clearly a monster. I would be quite supportive if NATO decided to intervene militarily to protect the Ukrainians. I'm a bit disappointed that they haven't actually done that. But we don't need to spend any more. All my life, I'm 76, all my life, we spent much more on the military than we ever needed to. Most of that money has ended up being wasted.
Tobias, how do you respond to what Ken Livingston has had to say?
I think the wasted money piece, I've been in the armed forces myself. I'll say that, yes, it's always difficult when you're in the world of hardware procurement for the military. But, mentioning Germany there, Germany is about to have the biggest defence budget in Europe. It's increasing its defence spending by 100 billion euros. This is a massive 180-degree change in foreign policy from Germany. They recognise that we are entering a new era of insecurity. They recognise they have to drop their sort of pacifist approach. They'll be spending a lot more and becoming a senior military player. So France, Britain are the other two major players as well. Ken is absolutely right to say Putin is a threat. I'm pleased to say he should have recognised, agrees that we should have intervened. Had we put in a division from NATO prior to the invasion, Putin wouldn't be invading today. My concern is that Putin isn't going to stop here. He can't afford to fail. And therefore, it's absolutely important that we recognise how overstretched our armed forces are at the moment. We simply don't have the ships on the one side, one part of our armed services, to deal with the Caribbean, to deal with the Indian Ocean, to deal with East Africa, to deal with the Middle East, the Suez areas, to deal with around British territorial waters, as well as the Arctic, and now a tilt to the Indo-Pacific. We simply don't have enough ships to cover all that. These are NATO commitments that we're part of. And likewise with our armed forces, a cut of 10,000 troops. And we have domestic challenges that we face, such as COVID. These things where absolutely, quite rightly, we lean on our armed forces to step in. Well, now I'm afraid they are overstretched. And the army itself is feeling that right now. We do need to revisit these numbers. That's what a stock check, a defence review is all about. Recognising the threats that are coming over the horizon, working out what your place is in the role, and then adjusting your defence architecture according to what you want to do.
However, Mr. Elwood, from which government department do we take that extra cash?
Well, that is a big question. It isn't for me to answer that. It's for me to spell out the dangers to the nation. If the Treasury wanted to provide the money, they could easily do so. We saw that with COVID. We saw that with other challenges. I make it very, very clear, and this is where we connect the budget that was looked at in the last couple of days, the economic challenges that we face today. What's affecting all of us? It's the cost of energy, the cost of fuel, the cost of food, all going up. Why? Because of what's directly happening in Ukraine. There's a direct correlation there. So we need to understand the more we sort out Ukraine, the more we stand up to Putin, the quicker we can actually start to fix our own economy. So you're right, there is that big question as to where does that money come from? But where there is a need, we need to recognise if we don't stand up, our economy will worsen. And therefore, it'll cost the taxpayers even more as prices start to or continue to increase.
Ken Livingston, you talked about how little the EU spend on defence, and isn't that a case in point? That's why the likes of Germany aren't able to talk tougher with Vladimir Putin.
Yes, but Germany isn't under threat. Putin...
We're all under threat, Ken.
No, we are not all under threat. Simple fact is, Putin's a monster. I want to see him out of power.
A monster with nuclear weapons, Ken.
But he's not planning to invade Western Europe.
Well, he wasn't planning to invade Ukraine.
Yes, and that's totally wrong, but he's not planning to invade Britain.
Are you taking his word for it?
We've spent more on our
military. Is he a WhatsApp friend of yours?
Other European countries. It's a nightmare. And almost all of our military spending in my lifetime was fighting in our colonies as the local people fought for their independence.
Are you seriously telling me? Go on, Mr. Elwood.
Well, I mean, I think that argument is a massive distraction from the focus here today. Germany is under threat. The whole of Europe is under threat because the character of conflict has changed. I think in the traditional sense that Ken is thinking about, on military might, either side of an Iron Curtain, then yes, perhaps it's not the same threat as we saw 30 years ago. But the way that Putin goes about warfare is very different indeed. We've been attacked here in the UK by a chemical attack. The Novichok attack in Salisbury was a small-scale effort on that same vein. This is what Putin can do and will continue to do. Cyber attacks and so forth will still come. In fact, they are occurring almost every single day. This is political warfare that we're now engaging with on top of the traditional aspects of war that we're now seeing play out in Ukraine. And as I say, if we don't stop Putin in Ukraine, it will push further because he will then claim diasporas in other parts of Europe, including those that could well be in NATO as well, and using weapon systems that we have no protocols over. It was clear from the NATO summit a couple of days ago or yesterday that we don't have an answer as to what Putin will do if he uses chemical weapons on a mass level. We have no answers yet. We are still looking pretty timid, and that will be exploited by the Kremlin.
Ken Livingston, if it was down to you, we wouldn't even have nuclear weapons, would we?
Well, basically, I mean, I grew up, I think I was born about a month before the first nuclear bomb was set off, and they dominated all my life as a child. Now we know, I mean, America has something like half of all the nuclear weapons in the world. We are not under threat from this. I mean, literally, it dominated the news all my life, but the simple fact is, literally, Putin, he's a monster. I think he should be in prison. He should be prosecuted for the war crimes he's conducting. But he knows if he starts using nuclear weapons, he will be obliterated by the much stronger nuclear force of the United States.
Well, you might trust him. I've got my doubts, Ken. Let's bring my panel in. David, Nina and Tony. Tony, if I could start with you, do you think we should double defence spending?
You could double defence spending, but if you lack the will to fight, if you lack the spine to fight, then it means nothing. Putin is in Ukraine because we have a craven, dribbling, senile old American president who made it absolutely clear right from the get-go, we're not going to get involved here. Putin watched America run out of Afghanistan. He saw all those 20 years of sacrifice by not least the British thrown away. So it really, it was made absolutely clear, Putin, even Biden even spoke of a small incursion. You can take the Donbass, and now, it's just such an embarrassment, Biden. And now he's saying he's going to respond in kind if Putin uses chemical weapons. No, we're not going to respond in kind. Even if he uses chemical weapons, we're not going to respond with chemical weapons. That just will not happen. So, we've got this craven leadership who lack the bottle to stand up to the playground bully, who's a nuclear-armed playground bully. And you can double defence spending, you can triple it, you can times it by 10. But if the bully thinks that you're too scared to ever confront him, then he's going to walk all over you, which is exactly what's happening now. And the Ukrainian people are showing what can be done with the will to stand up for your freedom and your country.
One thought on this one. Let me please go back to Tobias Elwood. Mr. Elwood, is there a risk that if we splash the cash when it comes to military spending, that we spend it on the wrong things? That has happened in the past.
Yeah, we need to put our hands up and say that's exactly the case. One of the jobs of the Defence Select Committee is to scrutinise how money is spent and whether it's spent wisely or not on the right things. This is ensuring that we invest in the areas that we require, that we're willing to lean into, but also as part of the profile that Britain wants to play on the international stage. At the moment, we have going back to the Navy, for example, extremely capable frigates and destroyers. They're the best in their class in the world. We simply don't have enough. We don't have enough force presence to be able to operate and dominate the areas of the seas that we need to patrol for trading purposes and so forth. our army, our tanks, for example, what's going on there with Boxer, with Ajax, with Warrior, and with Challenger. There are some big questions as to the decision-making as to how our land mobility is moving forward. So you're absolutely right. We shouldn't dodge that question at all. You should not be throwing money at the MOD saying, here you are, here is a blank check. And it's an interesting time going back to the Germans. 100 billion euros is a huge amount of money. I do hope the Prime Minister will be inviting Olaf Scholz to Chequers to say, let's team up. Let's see how we can work together. Let's see how our procurement processes can actually work in tandem so we can actually save money, procure the kit we need, but more importantly, foster a security relationship that can lead Europe in meeting up the challenges of the next couple of decades.
Nina Mishkov, do you think we should spend more money on defence?
No, frankly, I don't. And I noticed that Tobias Ellwood mentioned in what he was saying was wrong with what had been happening in the past with the Ajax tanks. I mean, do people know about the Ajax tanks, that they spent millions and millions on them, and they are not absolutely fit for purpose because they shake so much that they make the soldiers inside seasick. They're going deaf. They can't actually fire when they're moving. This is millions have been wasted. And also, you know, I think it's hilarious that we should be teaming up with Germany when we've spent so much time getting out of Europe. You know, we're really punching above our weight. Where do we think our standing is in the world? We have to be really realistic about this. We no longer have an empire. We no longer have colonies. This is just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. We should be realistic about where we stand in the world and do what we do really well.
Oh, Nina, I think you need to stop talking Britain down. We are a nuclear power and we are the 5th biggest economy in the world. Let me ask you your thoughts on this, David Oldroyd-Bolt. Should we spend more money? And if so, on what?
I don't think there's a case to argue against it. The problem is, as everybody has said, that we've made mistakes in defence procurement in the past. But that's not an argument against spending money wisely in the future. In fact, I should say it's one of the strongest arguments in favour of more defence spending, is that we now know that we can do it better and we can target that money in a way that is going to make sure that the soldiers on the front line have the best equipment they need and that the Navy has the ships it needs in order to fulfil its functions, as Mr. Ellwood said, not only militarily but in protecting our trade. I think we have to look beyond Ukraine, because if Mr. Putin is allowed to remain in power, if he's not taken out by someone inside his own regime who's worried about the possibility of nuclear war, there is every chance, I think, that he will continue to try and achieve his goal of expanding to take back the territory that Russia held before the First World War. So you have to look at the Baltic states, and there are unfortunately people in those states who would welcome his incursion. Not, I think, the majority, but there are certainly people there who would work with Russia so that Estonia and Lithuania particularly, became part of Russia again. If we think that he's going to stop now, why? I don't know how you would reach that conclusion based on his actions so far. So, of course, we need better defence spending, and we need more soldiers particularly.
An important conversation. Mr. Ellwood, we know how busy you are. Thank you so much for giving up a chunk of your Friday evening to join us on GB News. Tobias Ellwood is the chair of the UK's Defence Select Committee and is the Conservative MP for Bournemouth East. My thanks to Ken Livingston as well, who returns just after 10 for Mark Meets. We'll talk about his political career, why he went into politics and whether Labour can win again at the ballot box. Now, we were asking you whether you think that Britain should double its defence spending. That's been our text poll on Twitter. 72.7% of you say yes, while 27.3% agree with Ken and Nina that we should not. Get your opinions in, mark@gbnews.uk. So much more to come in the show. What are your worst run-ins with animals? Let us know. We'll talk about the hotel giving you guns to fight off wildlife. Also, looking forward to this, we want to hear from you throughout the show, mark@gbnews.uk. Let's have a look at what Saturday holds for you.
We've got a big Saturday for you on GB News. From 6 a.m, it's breakfast with Stephen and Anne. At 10, join Esther and Philip for the Saturday selection. Alistair, Darren and Nana take you through the day. And don't miss Neil Oliver Live at 7 p.m. At 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight, followed by Headliners. That's Saturday on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask. So why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I'll get to your emails shortly. Reacting to the big stories of the day is my all-star panel. Broadcaster and writer Tony Parsons, political commentator David Oldroyd Bolt, and the one and only journalist and presenter Nina Mishkov. Nina, great to have you on the show as a panellist. What a treat. As William and Kate continue their tour of the Caribbean, they have stirred some stormy tensions as anti-monarchy protesters in Jamaica and Belize have demonstrated. Take a look at this. We're just loading that video. It's quite controversial what happened. Take a look. And we'll come to it shortly. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge came under pressure in the Bahamas for the monarchy to pay reparations for slavery. There is a growing movement in the country to remove the Queen as head of state. A visit to Belize had to be rearranged over fears of disruptions. Well, it made us ask, does the Commonwealth matter anymore? Do we still need the Commonwealth? David?
I think we do need the Commonwealth because it exists precisely to combat these ideas that Britain is a uniquely racist country, that is a slave-owning country, which of course we were, and which of course the Duke of Cambridge apologised for in no uncertain terms, in board
He didn't
language.
actually apologise.
Thank God.
No,
Thank
no,
God.
No, but he didn't.
Thank God he didn't
say-
apologise.
He said it was a dreadful episode. It should never have happened. But he did not apologise. I think that is the sticking point. That is the sticking point. He didn't say the words that they were sorry.
Well, I think the Duke acknowledged that slavery was abhorrent and that we played a part in it.
Thank you.
And that should be taken as an apology. If we castigate ourselves before the world for everything we've ever done that is remotely controversial, we'll spend all our time apologising rather than being constructive and trying to help those countries with which we have these relations to be even better friends to us, which we need to do now.
And there should be the odd fleeting moment when we acknowledge that this country abolished slavery in 1807, which is about half a century before they ended it in the United States. And we should also acknowledge that Arab nations have had slaves. I spent a very pleasant...
Every empire has had slaves.
Well, I spent a very pleasant few weeks with the Ashanti in Ghana, who were the slavers, that enabled the Belgians, the French, the British to ship their slaves to the Caribbean and the cotton fields of America. So the idea that slavery is a uniquely British or European crime, of course it's a stain on humanity, of course it is. But this narrative that was perpetuated on this awkward Caribbean tour is that it was only ever inflicted on, these Why are they not asking for reparations from the Ashanti in Ghana? Why the Roman Empire not mentioned as slavers? You know, it's just so puerile, this idea that. And Jamaica has been an independent nation since 1962. You know, it's been free. It's a free country, and if they wish to say goodbye to the monarch, then we wish them well. But they're a grown-up country, and if you really want to be a part of the civilised grown-up countries in the world, stop asking us for money. Stop talking about reparations. It's crazy. It's absolutely raving nuts. The idea that William should be apologising for slavery. It's just.
Isn't it up there with Nicola Sturgeon apologising for the witches?
No. Well, I don't think even begin to equate that. But the thing is, when I saw the plane landing on the tarmac and Kate and Wills coming up, I just suddenly, it just flashed through my mind how inappropriate they looked. They looked like relics from a past era. They looked sort of stuffy. I mean, terrifically well dressed. I mean, I tried to analyse why, because when Princess Diana was travelling the world on our behalf, you know, I used to love reading about what frocks she wore to dance with John Travolta and all this sort of stuff. And yet, when I looked at this and I read the Daily Mail, you know, she was wearing an Amelia Wickstead gown worth £1,500 and carrying a bag and these earrings. It just didn't sit right, because there was that awful picture of those children, behind that fencing, and not meant like that, but it did look unfortunate. And there's just the wealth, and they seem so sort of stuffy, and just a big photo opportunity for them. And the people of the islands just used as a backdrop. It didn't seem to me they were reaching out in any way. The whole point of the Commonwealth is a bit sort of like the Olympics, in that it's a sort of a benign institution, hopefully, a benign, positive institution where...
It's a membership club with benefits, isn't it?
Where disparate people come together. They live in different ways, but that's a good thing, that we're all part of the same family who live in different ways, have different beliefs, have different customs, different religions. And that's a positive thing. But somehow, you know, particularly when the world's in such a state, and you look at the Ukraine situation, and the thing is, does the Commonwealth have any political clout at all? Was it meant to have political clout? Because how come India and Pakistan have not only not condemned Russia, but are doing business now with Putin? Yeah. How come we as a Commonwealth cannot somehow come together and say, look, hang on a minute, if we are interested in democracy and perpetuating the values that we all hold dear, surely we should be together as a whole. But that doesn't seem to be. It seems to be limited to a fabulous church service last week with everybody in their regalia and hats and God knows what else, and self-congratulations and congratulating each other, or a trip like this disaster.
And trade and diplomacy.
And if Pakistan and India can't condemn what Putin and Russia are doing in Ukraine, then surely the fault is with Pakistan and India rather than the Commonwealth.
No, but the Commonwealth. But what is the point of the Commonwealth?
I mean, I think it's the Queen has a gravitas and has a history and has 70 years of service, in that she would never have been treated with the disrespect that Catherine and William were shown in Jamaica. They would never have. They just wouldn't have done that to the snubbing. They're standing there. They have to stand there and be lectured by this mediocre Jamaican Prime Minister about how we're going to move.
You say he's mediocre, but he's the man that the Jamaican people have voted in.
Well, I say he's mediocre because he's mediocre because he's using an invited guest. They didn't have to go there. I mean, if you don't want them there, just tell them not to come. They won't come.
He politicised it. He weaponised it, didn't he?
Weaponised it, completely politicised it. Tried to score his, cheap little political points to please his supporters in the People's National Party, whatever their ridiculous name is. And if have a referendum, get rid of them. But they were just showed such a. That was just so rude. It's just so rude. And this constant, give me money, give me money, give me money. What about all the other slavers in empires?
Who is funding their trip? I believe that they are, all the nations that are being visited, are pretty much funding this trip. Who's paying for it?
But the politicisation of the Commonwealth is, I think, a relatively recent thing because, well, fine, during the 1960s it was politicised when there was the removal of colonialism, but for the past sort of 40, 50 years, that's been less and less the case. I agree with Tony. Again, it was just a lazy thing to do, really, a disrespectful thing to do. I agree with Nina that the optics of the initial visit were unfortunate, and as Robert Hardman writes today, both in the Mail and the Telegraph, he thinks that's because basically you've had no royal visits for 2 years abroad and they've fallen out of practice. You've got new people there.
You know, that's a really pathetic...
But also, is there any difference
point.
when a celebrity visits Jamaica and meets locals and receives flowers and gets a photo taken?
There's just something about this. This was like us on high visiting you down there.
You know what it made me think of? It made me think of that glorious spring day in 2018 in Windsor when I was at the... with the crowds to celebrate the wedding of Harry and Meghan, and they would have been absolutely brilliant on this tour. They would have been absolutely brilliant. They would have been, weeping, slap a bit of factor 50 on Harry's bald spot, tell Meghan this is the role of a lifetime, to step out there and, you couldn't... And
so you think William and Kate are a bit stiff and a bit austere?
Well, I think they did as best they could. I think they did the best they could, and I'm actually big... I think they're great ambassadors for this country. I would personally love to see the Crown skip a generation because I think the optics of having... a king who's knocking on for 80 is it's not great. It's not great for the spirit of the nation. It's not great for
than me.
And I just think that the age gap between Prince Charles and the Queen is more than the age gap between Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas. So it's just like you lose this revered monarch, and then you get this new guy who's almost the same age, So I think they did a great...
And are we saying, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. Are they not, William and Kate, who are going to be king and queen, are they not there to engage with populations around the world?
Well, they are, but in fact they've been so somehow shoved into this royal mould that their true personalities, not that I know what they are, don't come through. Whereas Harry and Meghan, Harry's one of the guys who'd have been joking around. It would have been a completely different thing.
But this is very superficial, isn't it?
It's entirely superficial.
You're talking about the optics of it.
Well, the optics are very important. Otherwise, why do them? This whole trip is...
There was condemnation about the couple shaking hands with people through a fence.
That's dreadful.
Right, and it wasn't a great look, except that other celebrities have previously engaged with locals
and there was,
via the same fence.
Wouldn't you rather have the dignity of the Cambridges, bearing in mind that they are going to be king and queen one day, than the flippant B-list celebrity of Harry and Meghan, who chose not to do this?
And I think a lot of people on that tour enjoyed seeing them. I think a lot of people would have been charmed by them. They would have been happy to see them.
The royals are box office wherever they go, Nina.
I think,
especially in the Commonwealth.
It's clearly not big enough box office for Meghan Markle.
Not anymore.
I think they possibly tried too hard. I think quoting Bob Marley twice was probably overdoing it. One just like one love. One love. It's all a little bit dreadlock holiday.
William hasn't got the hair to do dreadlocks, has he?
No, sadly not. But
they tried so hard. They tried so hard.
Where's the warmth? Where's the charisma? I'm not feeling it. It's not so long ago that Wills was actually castigated by the press. We forget this because he was just not pulling his weight. We never saw them. He was petulant. And I still get the feeling that he's rather petulant, and and sort of rather stuck up. I don't get it, and I don't get this worship of Kate. I just don't see it. God knows the Daily Mail has pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed to make her a star, and I don't get it at all.
Oh, Kate's great. Kate's great.
Will the Commonwealth survive the next 100 years, Nina?
I don't really think so. I honestly don't. I can't see it. I just don't see it as an entity.
It strikes me as a win-win for both Britain
I think it will, and
the nations of the Commonwealth.
It will expand to include countries that, as it already has done, that were never part of the British Empire, over which we had
like Rwanda.
Yes, indeed, because it's actually a rather good thing to be part of this great brotherhood of nations, which stretches all across the globe. I think there's a Commonwealth country in nearly every continent bar Antarctica.
We have a shared history. Kiwis and Aussies and South Africans and Indians
I was brought up in South Africa.
Came to fight alongside us in world wars that they could have set out.
So you could use them. You could use them as cannon fodder. You could use them, and they came.
That's a fair point. Well, look, it's all about opinions. What do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. Lots of emails coming in on this. Rubbish. Prince Charles and Camilla will make brilliant kings, a king and queen, followed by William and Catherine. The Commonwealth, the British monarchy is the greatest symbol we have, encompassing 100 years in the past, being brought into the future. I'm all for the Commonwealth. Well, we'll catch up on those issues later in the show. There's still time for you to have your voice heard in Mark Meets at 10. Get your questions in for Ken Livingston, mark at gbnews.uk. Plus, my alternative headlines and more from my amazing panel. See you shortly.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Coming up, we've got my alternative news headlines plus more from my panel. In our news agenda, is it wrong to call children fat in the battle against childhood obesity? Plus, have you had a run-in with a wild animal? We'll talk to our panel about the most amazing story in relation to that. We've got another great British game show as well. Is there any point still going to the cinema when you've got a flat screen telly at home? And more importantly, you've got GB News, haven't you? And coming up, my Mark Meets guest is waiting in the wings. In fact, he's not had a drink yet, which is very unusual on a Friday night. Ken Livingston is live as my Mark Meets guest. We'll talk about why he went into politics and whether he thinks Labour can win the next election. But first, here's Miranda with the headlines.
Thank you. Good evening. The top stories from the GB newsroom. The president of Ukraine has urged Russia not to waste time and start engaging in meaningful negotiations. His comments come as Russia claimed the first phase of its military operation in Ukraine is almost complete. The Defence Ministry says it's now focusing on the country's breakaway Donbass region, which includes Luhansk and Donetsk. But President Zelensky says the Russian military is facing tough opposition.
Over the past week, our heroic armed forces have dealt powerful blows to the enemy, significant losses. By restraining Russia's actions, our defenders are leading the Russian leadership to a simple and logical idea. We must speak. Speak meaningfully, urgently, fair, and for the sake of the result, not for the sake of wasting time.
A spokesman for the Ukrainian president says he's disappointed by the NATO summit and was expecting more bravery from world leaders. The comments come as Ukrainian forces reportedly are in control of the besieged port city of Mariupol. Ukraine's top security official says they're holding on and no one will surrender. A joint game plan to reduce Europe's dependency on Russian energy has been announced by President Joe Biden. The US will provide the European Union with at least 15 billion additional cubic metres of liquefied natural gas by the end of the year. In other news, the jury in the murder trial of Sir David Amess has been shown the suspect's police interviews. In the video, Ali Harbi Ali was heard calmly describing how he carried out the attack. The court's been told the 26-year-old stabbed the Conservative MP 21 times in October last year. He has denied murder and the preparation for terrorist acts.
We have been informed that you made a significant comment following your arrest, where you have made the comment, it was terrorist. Is that correct?
I think I said, what's it called? The nature of the crime, I said is terror.
Mr. Ali, is this a terrorist attack?
I mean, I guess, yeah. I killed an MP and I've done it. Yeah.
Okay.
A man who murdered his ex-girlfriend's 2-year-old son has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 25 years. Kamar Brown and the child's mother, Felicia Shirley, abused Kyrell Matthews for weeks, leaving him with multiple rib fractures and internal injuries. Brown was convicted of murder while Shirley was found guilty of manslaughter and jailed for 13 years. And in breaking news, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says a P&O ferry has been detained for being unfit to sail following reports a vessel has been impounded at the port of Larne in Northern Ireland. And we'll have more news on that story as we have it. Well, on TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Mark.
Many thanks to Miranda, who returns in an hour's time. It's time now for my alternative news headlines, and we bring you the exciting news that the Daily Mail star columnist Liz Jones has had a successful operation to restore her eyebrows. The lengthy procedure was reported in this week's Mail. Well, here at Mark Dolan tonight, we've managed to get our hands on exclusive before and after photos of Liz and her eyebrows. So here's the before photograph. A fine lady, I think you'll agree. I've worked with her before. She's a real professional. But maybe those eyebrows are a bit thin. Here's the after photo. Oh, impressive stuff. What a winning smile. Rishi Sunak this week delivered his mini statement, and it proved to be a litany of bad news for hard-pressed Brits. However, he celebrated the cut in fuel tax with a photograph of him filling up this Kia shortly afterwards. The only issue is that the car wasn't his. We understand it was lent to him by somebody at Sainsbury's. Which got us to thinking here on Mark Dolan tonight, what other vehicles might Rishi Sunak fill up? How about this option? This time next year, Boris, we'll all be billionaires. How about this option? Who are you going to call? Rishi Sunak. And how about this one? Rishi goes bananas. And last but not least, Rishi goes to war. Well, what a dashing figure he cuts. Military news now, speaking of tanks. Marines have approved a 2-tone nail polish for troops and longer hair in a push to positively impact diversity, equity and inclusion. That's right, nail polish and longer hair. Now, I think this is very sensible, as Russian troops in Ukraine, for example, wouldn't take kindly to being misgendered. What is Russian for she, her? Back to the Daily Mail's Liz Jones and those eyebrows. Here's the before photograph. Brilliant journalist and a real professional, but those eyebrows, they are on the thin side. Here's the after. Pick up a penguin. The Labour MP Charlotte Nichols has defended the trans woman swimmer Leah Thomas against accusations that she has an advantage. Here's the tweet. As a former competitive swimmer, indeed, I know full well how much training is required for a title like this, and anyone nastily trying to diminish Leah Thomas's incredible achievement because of lazy transphobia should frankly pipe down. I agree with Charlotte Nichols. I actually think it's harder for Leah Thomas. Having a penis and testicles must really slow you down in the pool. I guess it depends on size. Surprisingly, I fly through the water. One last look at Liz Jones and those eyebrows. Here's the before image. A woman of substance. I'm a fan, a great writer, but those eyebrows, they are thin, aren't they? Here's the after. Now you're talking. She's not a Muppet, not in my book. And those are your alternative news headlines. It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, sport, showbiz and beyond. Tonight, former Mayor of London from 2000 to 2008, Ken Livingston, the first inaugural London mayor, no less. He's the man who earned the nickname Red Ken. He served as the Member of Parliament for Brent East from 1987 to 2001, and he was the leader of the Greater London Council, the GLC, from 1981 until its abolition in 86. Characterised by the Telegraph columnist Charles Moore as the only truly successful left-wing British politician of modern times, always principled and never boring, Ken Livingston is one of the most recognised and significant political figures of his generation. And I'm delighted to say he joins me now. Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Now, Ken, you let something slip before you came on air, that you were offered a knighthood by Tony Blair.
Yeah, I mean...
Or was it talked about?
I got a phone call saying the Blair government would like to give you a knighthood. And I thought, I don't want people having to say Sir Ken. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's no wrong nonsense.
Well, it would have got you a better restaurant table, wouldn't it?
No, I have always had good restaurant tables. I used to be a restaurant critic back in the 90s. And
right.
It was amazing. I mean, it was the Evening Standard employed me, so I could go and have a really expensive meal, but the Evening Standard paid for it. I loved it.
What's the best job you've had in politics?
Oh, I mean, clearly being mayor, because when I was leader of the GLC, I was running a council. There were 92 members. You had to have votes all the time and everything. But then when Tony Blair created the mayoralty, he just put all the power in the hands of the mayor. And the London Assembly, they could criticise me, but they could never actually block anything I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that was great fun for me. But one day, you'll have a mayor who's corrupt, and that'll be a disaster.
Well, that is obviously a
because
big
you actually look
concern.
at America, they've got the mayoral system, and that's, Tony Blair used the American mayoral system for London. But at any one time in America, there's always at least 50 former mayors, in prison for corruption. And if you put all that power... I mean, I could have sat there in those 8 years and done all these squalid deals with big business, and I could have millions in some Swiss bank account.
Yeah, so the due diligence isn't there, the checks and balances.
Well, very little, because literally the Assembly has virtually no power. Yeah. I mean, whereas when I was the leader of the GLC, the council could remove me from office at any time they wanted.
Whilst you were Mayor of London, you introduced the congestion charge, the Oyster card, articulated buses, and you opposed the government's privatisation of London Underground. So which of those would be your great legacy, do you think?
Well, I think the legacy is the congestion charge, because a few other cities have now copied that. But mayors are very worried, because when you start charging drivers coming into your city, that might lose you quite a lot of votes. But immediately we did that. Air pollution went down 12%, and we have thousands of people dying every year in London because of the air quality, and we've got to tackle that. And that means encouraging people to leave the car at home and get the bus in or get a bike, and that's important.
You were an independent mayoral candidate, then you were Labour's official selection. So tell me about your relationship with the Blair government whilst you were actually in...
Well, you see, if you think back, the day I became the leader of the Great London Council in 81, Thatcher made a speech saying, my plan was to impose on Britain a communist tyranny like Eastern Europe. until Saturday made a speech, no deal speech, he did have a press officer. No one knew who you were. And I think Tony Blair grew up in that world. And I think he genuinely believed I was a mad Marxist. My loyalty was communism. I wanted to impose a Trotskyite tyranny and all of that. And so it was only once I became mayor and he saw I was actually... I came into politics to do things, to make life better. And when I got into politics in the late 60s, that was the same for the Tories. I followed John Major onto Lambeth Council. He built more council homes than the previous Labour administration. In those days, everyone came into politics to make life better for people. Now, it's filled with idiots like Boris that want to be an international bloody celebrity.
How did you rate Boris as London mayor? Because he would argue crime fell and the economy boomed.
No, I mean, he did absolutely nothing except he built the cable car to nowhere. And still today, that has only 4 regular daily users. I mean, I looked at that when I was mayor. I mean, you just saw it's going to be a disaster. I can't understand why he actually did it. And that is the only thing he did. He ended up opening a lot of things I'd started, but he never bloody well invited me to that.
Well, of course, the bicycle rental scheme is known as the Boris bike scheme.
Yeah,
but I believe you conceived it, is that right?
Yeah, we started that. But, you know, Boris is just a bit like Donald Trump, always just presenting himself and wanting to be a celebrity and all that nonsense. Whereas I just came into politics because I like to run things and do things. I mean, when I left school, my first work was 8 years in a cancer unit attached to the NHS. And that defined my thinking. You came in to make life better for people.
I mean, Boris Johnson has got a few things done, hasn't he? He was successfully the mayoral candidate twice for the Conservatives in a Labour-dominated city. He got Brexit done. He had the amazing landslide victory in December 2019. And he also presided over a world-class vaccine rollout during the pandemic. He's no slouch.
Well, actually, the vaccine rollout, that's down to the doctors and surgeons in the NHS, not Boris.
Well, no, because it was the Department of Health and also the vaccine officials who hedged their bets brilliantly and invested in all of those technologies.
Look, I watched Boris Johnson those 8 years he was mayor. I was amazed that he never really initiated anything. And I realised...
Except an economic boom?
Well, no.
What about the construction boom in London?
Well, let me tell you, after he defeated me and became mayor, he said, I'd like to take you out for a meal. And I assumed he wanted to talk to me about how to run the mayoralty. All he talked about, that entire meal, was how I had failed to become Prime Minister. And I realised, and that's all he wants to do. And he did virtually nothing. And even now as Prime Minister, he's doing much less than almost any other Prime Minister in my lifetime. He is the worst Prime Minister of my lifetime.
I mean, this is a Prime Minister who challenged the SAGE scientists in July, the 19th of July. He insisted on Freedom Day, cases fell, and the scientists were proved wrong. SAGE wanted him to cancel Christmas. He pushed back on that. This guy's got good instincts.
No.
And now he's played a blinder in Ukraine, with the Ukrainian people saying that he's been very supportive, a standing ovation from Zelensky, and Russia saying their greatest threat is the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, which is flattery.
And that is about the only thing I agree with him on. I'm appalled that the West hasn't done more to stop Putin and drive him out. But the simple fact is, I just watched Boris, and he just never seemed to have an agenda. It was always just about promoting himself. He wants to be a famous international celebrity. I mean, and literally, for 7 years, he was a journalist working at the Telegraph under the editor Max Hastings. And I bumped into Max Hastings and he said to me, never leave Boris alone with your wife or your wallet.
Right, yeah. Wise advice. Let me ask you about your politics. Were you always politically to the left, Ken?
No. I mean, my mum and dad were working class Conservatives. That the whole nature.
What went wrong?
Well, no, a third of
black sheep in the family.
In that post-war world, a third of the working class voted Conservative. And it was only, I suppose, in the 1960s, because my first interest was natural history and astronomy and all that, but then watching the Vietnam War, America just killing millions and millions of Vietnamese, bombing them and all that, I then got interested in politics, and then I decided, I'd come into it and try and make life better for things. So I joined in '69, just as loads of about a third of Labour Party members were leaving because they're annoyed with the Wilson government. And so 2 years later, I'm on the local council. I couldn't believe it.
Tell me about your relationship with Margaret Thatcher. She was Prime Minister whilst you were serving as leader of the GLC. She presided over its abolition.
Yeah.
So did you encounter her face-to-face very often?
No, it was only when she'd retired as Prime Minister. We were at some social event and she staggered over and said, "You must run for mayor." And I thought, "But you abolished the GLC," or so I was running for it. Now you want me to run for mayor? But she was a bit, frail then. I thought she perhaps wasn't mentally with it.
Perhaps not. No, that's one hell of an endorsement, isn't it? What was your relationship like with the Conservative government in the 80s? It must have been attritional at best.
Well, no, literally, it was just from the moment I became the leader of the GLC, they depicted me as an agent of the Soviet Union. I was supporting the IRA's bombing campaign. I was physically attacked 3 times on the streets in the months after all this propaganda. It was only when I started appearing on TV programmes like this, people realised this was all bollocks. I'm not a mad Marxist.
No, most certainly not. And what about any other ambitions? Did you want to be the leader of the Labour Party at any point?
Oh, I would have loved to have done that. I would have loved to have been Prime Minister. I would have wanted to change our country and make it better.
Why didn't it happen?
Well, basically, all that, loony left smears from Thatcher meant a lot of Labour MPs were very suspicious of me. And when I became an MP, Neil Kinnock, who was the Labour leader, he changed the rules. Up until then, you could stand for the leadership of the Labour Party if 2 Labour MPs nominated you. He made it 20%. No lefty could get 20%. And so it was only when Ed Miliband reduced it to about 12 or 15%, Jeremy Corbyn could just about make it.
What's your overview of Tony Blair's years in power?
He did some good things. I like particularly on lesbian and gay rights and so on. But, of course, the real nightmare, he went along with all the American wars in the Middle East. And that's been all my life. Virtually every Prime Minister, whether Labour or Tory, has gone along with the wars of the United States. Luckily for me, the one that didn't do that, Harold Wilson, in the 1960s, refused to send British troops to Vietnam. Otherwise, my generation would have been all sent off there and murdered.
Did the Labour movement pick the wrong Miliband brother when they voted for Ed Miliband?
Well, no, I think Ed Miliband was better than his brother. But at that stage...
David was more electable, wasn't he? More of a Blairite figure.
No. I mean, I wasn't supporting either of them. I was supporting Ed Balls, because Ed Balls had been effectively the deputy to Gordon Brown in the Treasury. I worked with him a lot while I was mayor. He was so good at delivering things. He was the most competent government minister I ever dealt with. He delivered things, they worked.
However, he failed to be elected.
Yeah.
Which obviously meant that David Cameron got in. Yeah. There was a referendum which in the end took us out of the European Union. So, you could sort of look back at that decision by the Labour Party to elect Ed Miliband as the beginning of what a lot of people consider to be our problems.
I think if Ed Balls had been the Labour leader, we would have won that election, because he's like me, came into politics to do things, not just be a celebrity.
You mean Ed Miliband?
No, Ed Balls.
Oh, I see. You think Ed Balls should have been leader?
Ed Balls, as I said, in all the time of that Labour government, he was the most effective and competent.
I've got my Eds mixed up. I should have...
Get him in and talk to him. You'll love it.
Yeah, no, we'd like to speak to Ed Balls, an interesting guy. What about since then? We've had Jeremy Corbyn leading the Labour Party. That's been a disaster, hasn't it?
Well, part of the problem was Jeremy got elected to Parliament in '83. He spent a third of a century just sitting on the back bench, never running anything. And, although everyone likes him, he had no idea how to actually run it, I was lucky. I joined the Labour Party. 2 years later, I'm the Vice Chair of the Local Housing Committee. So all my early time, I learned how to do things. Poor old Jeremy just sat there making speeches on the back benches.
Yeah, and what were his failings as leader of the Labour Party, do you think? Where did he go wrong?
Well, I don't think he really imposed his will on the party.
Well, he got rid of all the Blairite MPs, didn't he?
No, not all. But, literally, the first time my partner and I she met him at a dinner, And as we came away, she said, that's the nicest man I've ever met in my life. And that's how he got the Labour nomination. There's an awful lot of MPs who were not in any sense left-wing, but they voted for Jeremy because he's an incredibly nice guy.
What about the toxic regime around him, though? His advisors, notoriously cruel.
Well, hang on. I don't think they're toxic. Think of all the things you've been said about me and my advisors. We were all depicted as mad commie agents.
And what about the current leader, the current incumbent? How do you rate Keir Starmer?
I really like Keir Starmer, and I think if he can win the next election, he will be an incredibly competent Prime Minister. Because he didn't come into politics to be a celebrity. He came, and you read, he's only been in Parliament about 6 years. Before that, his entire career was pursuing and getting prison sentences for murderers and rapists. He's there to do things.
However, what have you seen in him as leader of the opposition that tells you he'll be a great Prime Minister, notwithstanding his legal career? What has he done in politics?
He's there to actually just deliver on policy.
But he's boring everyone to tears, isn't he? Prime Minister's questions, he's got no charisma.
No, I watch and I really admire him. I think he's
Boris
brilliant.
runs rings around him every Wednesday, doesn't he?
Yeah, but that's a joke.
Captain Hindsight.
A Prime Minister that just spends all his time not answering questions and putting off stunts and jokes. Whereas Keir Starmer, like my generation, came into politics to make life better for people.
But he's a bit right on. He's a bit woke, isn't he?
He's a bit
taking the knee, a bit right on.
No.
Taking the knee and just being very virtue signalling all the time.
I watch Prime Minister's Questions every week. I think Keir Starmer does brilliantly. But, of course, we now live in a world with so many people that they just want to see funny celebrity things.
What do you think will happen at the next election?
I think Labour can win, and I think it will
On their own?
Oh, yeah. And I think it would be the best Labour government since 1945 Clement Attlee.
Yeah, do you think so?
Yeah.
And when do you think the election will be, by the way?
I have no idea. I mean, you've got all these new rules, so it might be we have to wait another 2 years under this awful idiot.
Final thought. Would you call yourself a socialist?
Oh, yeah.
Do you not think that socialism is done now, given that we've spent £500 billion responding to this pandemic? The coffers are empty. What does a future Labour Prime Minister actually do without the ammunition, without the cash?
If I look back at my lifetime, when you had progressive governments, sometimes conservative ones, increasing public spending, our lives got better all the time. If you cut public spending, you are damaging people's lives and in some cases actually leading to deaths.
Well, I would agree with you, but that was before we borrowed £500 billion. What do we do now?
Look, we are the 6th richest nation in the world. The simple fact is we're wasting too much of our money on military spending. Germany spends about 2% of their GDP on the military. We spend 3%. I'd reduce
Is now the time for that conversation?
Yeah, we're not going to war.
Putin raging across Ukraine?
Putin
an expansionist China? A dangerous North Korea?
No, we're not going to be involved in a war with China, nor even with Putin. I think Putin's a monster, and I look forward to him being removed by his own party at some point.
Yeah. A quick line on this. You were suspended from the Labour Party in April 2016. You were accused of bringing the party into disrepute following a BBC Radio London interview. Do you mind if I quote this to you? You said the following: when Hitler won his election in 1932, his policy then was that Jews should be moved to Israel. He was supporting Zionism before he went mad and ended up killing 6 million Jews. Are you anti-Semitic?
No, that's just simple history. I mean, literally, when Hitler got elected, he sat down, his team did, and signed an agreement with the German Zionists. And over the next 6 years, they worked together to move 60,000 of Germany's Jews to the then British colony of Palestine. If they hadn't done that deal, those 60,000 Jews would have followed the other 6 million to the gas chambers.
But you must regret those comments, given the fact that it makes you sound like an apologist for one of the worst monsters in history. And also, a cursory glance at Mein Kampf will tell you that he had a problem with the Jews from a young age.
Let me tell you what happened. In the week following my suspension, somewhere between 35 and 40 people stopped me on the street. They all said the same thing. I'm Jewish. I know what you said is true. What's all this about? I simply stated historical fact.
Any regrets with your comments, given the offence it caused to many?
What I regret is when John Mann, the Labour MP, was screaming in my face I was a Nazi apologist, what I regret is that Jeremy should have suspended him, not have me suspended.
Ken, final thought. Amazing career that you've had, an amazing character. It's great to have you in the studios here at GB News. What's next for you? Because you've got plenty of energy and the intellect is razor sharp.
Well, I'm a 76-year-old. And
you could be US president.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, basically, ever since I was accused of being anti-Semitic, I was cut out of everything political. So now I'm just the old house husband.
Is that right? Are you any good at that?
I'm very good. I do all the shopping, prepare the food, look after the kids.
You good at hoovering? Yeah, I like it. You've got red washing up gloves because you're red.
Yellow.
Aren't you? Yellow. Going Lib Dem all of a sudden in your old age. Ken, what a treat to have you in the studio. Thanks for making the time.
For having me.
Do come back and see us again soon. Ken Livingston, folks. Thanks for your emails. I'll get to those very shortly, responding to what Ken had to say. Coming up in the news agenda, we're going to talk about whether it's right to call a child obese. We'll talk about the BMI index. Is it okay to call a kid fat if it saves their life? Also, still to come at the end of the show, a homage to Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather, which celebrated its 50th birthday this weekend. Stay tuned for a game of Gang Gang style. Looking forward to that one. So much more to come. See you in 2.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
How about this? Dawn says, Dear Mark, my dad worked for Ken Livingston at the GLC in the 80s. He is as bent as a 3-bob note. Wow. Spicy email there from Dawn. Who defends your democracy, Ken, says Alan. Ed says, here we go again, Celebrity Ken mocking himself for all and sundry to see. Well, look, there's a fair few brickbats heading in the direction of Ken Livingston, but we do like to have people of all political hues on this show, and love the guy or hate him, he is a great political character. Still with me, reacting to the big stories of the day, is my all-star panel, Tony Parsons, columnist and author. His new book is out very shortly. Political commentator and broadcaster David Oldroyd-Bolt, and journalist and presenter Nina Mishkov. We're going to get to our next story shortly, but I wanted to mention this, which is that a man, second only, I think, to the Beatles in terms of record sales, turned 75 today. That's Sir Elton John, who I think is the best-selling solo artist in the history of American music. So Elton is 75, and Nina, I think he's a friend of yours.
Well, I wouldn't say he's a friend now, but we met when he was 20 and I was 21. And so he's kind of run through like a thread through my life. And
so you would have been a budding journalist at that point, were you?
I was then on Jackie magazine.
Brilliant.
And I met him in a recording studio, and he just literally called himself Elton for 6 months. So, you know, if people said Elton, you know, he sometimes didn't turn round because he hadn't quite got used to it yet. And that morning, by chance, he had written a song called Nina, and the lyrics as well. And he gave me a copy of it. And when I went back to Scotland, because that's where Jackie was done from, we used to correspond. And then when I came down from London once, about a year later, he took me to lunch because he'd had his first album, Empty Sky, and. I say lunch, it sounds grand. It was the same little cafe that we'd had a cup of tea at when we first met. And he was amazing. So he's been through it. My first visit to the States was courtesy of him. He took a plane load of family and friends to LA to watch him perform at Dodger Stadium in 1973.
So you were at that show, which of course was immortalised in the film Rocket Man.
Yes, absolutely. I was there. If I looked at the stadium, I could see we were just there.
But this guy, I mean, literally number 2 to the Beatles, I think. I think we underrate his achievements here in the UK. 500 million records sold.
He's extraordinary because his ability to write a song with the tunes, the music. When there's so much on now about, you know, for instance, Ed Sheeran's up in court for, you know, plagiarism and stuff. Elton has this kind of inexhaustible supply of tunes, and if he didn't write something in 15 minutes, he'd chuck it aside. So he is brilliantly talented, brilliant piano player. And a great guy, very, very wise, so funny, so warm, so self-deprecating. I mean, he has his tantrums and tiaras.
Have you witnessed any tantrums?
Yes, I have. Yes, of course I have.
What are they like?
Oh, they are fearsome. They are. But then the storm passes. I mean, you all laugh at him, and the storm passes, and he laughs too, and he'll tell the story against himself.
Has he changed much since he was 20? Since he was
I haven't seen him for about 5, 6, 7 years. So
But in that time, from being a young starlet.
No, he's the same essence of the person he was. I mean, of course, he has become accustomed to a life that's very easy in some ways. But he's the same driven person. I mean, he's solid as a rock. His duty and his professionalism. You know, Adele not doing her Vegas season. I mean, she should know what Elton went through to you know, he was standing there when he was ill after operations. He was wearing a nappy, for heaven's sake, under his suit, and he was performing. You know, so he is one of the old style.
Well, yeah, I mean, where do you start? Watford Football Club, the Elton John AIDS Foundation, gay rights.
Yeah, and I think he could always see the absurdity of when he was really out of it and struggling. I interviewed him a couple of times, and I always found him quite a kind man and very encouraging of younger people and musicians and journalists. He would, you know, call you, which other people wouldn't do. And I remember an anecdote he told me once about being, when he was really coked out of his skull, being in a hotel, I think on Park Lane, and he called down to the reception desk and says, "Can you stop the wind?"
There you go.
It's too windy.
Yeah, well,
Please stop the wind.
That's amazing. I said that to my production team earlier, but apparently it's the aircon. Yeah, that is Elton John for you, isn't it? Remarkable. Well, he's 75 today. Happy birthday to Sir Elton John, who's currently on the biggest grossing tour in the world and celebrating a #1 album during lockdown. Not a bad achievement. Well, let's talk about children now. Imagine your child being sent a letter from school, not to congratulate them on jobs well done, or for parents to be kept up to date with their work or grades, but a letter telling you that your primary school-aged child is fat, or in fact has a BMI, which makes them clinically obese. For legal reasons, we can't show a picture of this little girl. She's a beautiful little girl, by the way, but her mum stated that her daughter was actually crowned the petite winner of a national pageant. So what do we think? Is it OK to tell children, Nina, that they're fat?
I don't think you should tell children that they're fat. But I'm more exercised by the fact that this woman has gone to the press, the national press, about this. You know, instead of getting the letter, being outraged that her daughter is being called fat, and she does look like a normal average child. These things are wrong. I mean, the BMI is a kind of it's a rather crude assessment. It's height.
Every rugby
weight.
player is way over the BMI. Yeah. Every rugby player in the world. So it's just it's rubbish.
That's muscle. But it is a very crude assessment of if you are overweight or not. It can be that. I mean, children don't have those sort of muscles, and there's the old fallacy of heavy bones. That just doesn't exist. But you don't You go to the school and say, look, this is outrageous, here's my child, you know, blah, blah, blah. But you don't go to the press about it. Now, everybody knows about it. All the kids in the playground will be knowing about it. That to me is a bigger crime. It's a much bigger crime. And actually, you know, encouraging him to go Miss Diamond pageant, I'm not too keen about that either.
Yeah, we do have a problem with childhood obesity, though, and I think it's time for tough love for some of our kids, David.
I think it's been time for that for a very long time indeed. It's truly shocking if you stand by any McDonald's or KFC at school leaving time to see children going in there, primary school age children who are enormous. And these are not the outliers as they used to be. These seem to be, by and large, the way that children are built now. Clearly, the BMI is a crude measure of this, but something must be monitored from the earliest years. We know that if you are obese as a child, then your life chances across the board are going to be much lower. You'll suffer from ill health, you'll have joint pain, heart pain, greater risk of stroke, and it has to be captured early. And if parents themselves are incapable of doing it or haven't the knowledge to ensure that their children don't get fat, then of course the state has a duty of care to step in, probably through the school system.
And part of this culture of denialism is the problem, isn't it? My little Johnny isn't fat.
Oh, indeed.
No one's kids are fat, just other people's kids.
Well, indeed, and I think the problem is that we're perhaps now into the second generation where being overweight is the norm rather than the exception. So if your body image is that of a larger person, of someone who is fat, then if your child is like that, you will see nothing wrong with it. And I think this has to be addressed, because otherwise, now we've got 1 in 2 adults in the UK is overweight, 1 in 3 children. That should be a shocking statistic for a civilised country, that 1 in 3 of its children is clinically overweight.
Yeah, I mean, this is a disservice to kids, isn't it, Tony? I mean, did you know any fat kids when you were growing up?
There was usually, well, when I was a lad, there was usually one kid in the classroom who was the fat kid, and I can clearly remember going to the United States for the first time in the 70s. On the road with Thin Lizzy and being shocked by all the fat people in America. And we have caught up with America, but it is a class issue. Most of those overweight children, they're not at private schools, they're not from educated middle-class homes, they're from poor families, they're from the working class. And it's tragic. I mean, this story, that little girl is a beautiful child and is not remotely overweight. So I think the problem is in the teacher's head and in the interfering school. But it is a class issue, and it's about education. And I agree. We're into the second generation now. It's fat kids of fat parents, and I don't know how you break that link. But it is, as in America, it's a class issue, and it's a poverty issue, and it's an education issue.
David, I know you're not a big fan of the big states.
No.
But I wonder whether this is a case for sugar taxes or fast food taxes.
I don't see that the sugar tax has done anything to help the issue. So, as usual with most sort of blanket systems of this sort, it looks good on paper and does nothing.
Soft drinks manufacturers have reduced the amount of sugar in their products, though, haven't they? So the industry has changed.
But I think that's more because of societal pressure than because you've got to spend 10 pence more to get full-fat Coke as opposed to Coke Zero or whatever it is. It is absolutely about education, and it's about making sure that people know that if you're cooking using fresh vegetables and good cheap cuts of meat, it's going to cost you less than buying convenience food or fast food. It's going to be better for you, and you've got a skill that you can use throughout your life.
The trouble is we don't have the tradition of cuisine in this country that we use that they say they have in France or in Italy. And we have unfortunately developed a culture of snacking. It is like the Americans. And the occasions for children to sit down with their parents at a table and eat 3 meals a day, which is what actually keeps you healthy. And apart from that, moving, obviously, eat less, move more is the very basic thing. But we don't have that. And the trouble is that in the more deprived areas, there is a higher rate of fast food shops. It's a kind of vicious chain. So it's a combination of ignorance and an inability to be, I agree with you completely, Tony, but there are ways, if people could learn to cook. I mean, we used to have cooking lessons at school. It used to be,
well, it's still mandated in the national curriculum, but it seems to provide absolutely no inspiration.
I don't think it's...
I think you hit on something really quite important. It's the decline of communal eating. It's the decline of the dinner table where people get together and eat, and usually it's something they would have cooked. It seems that there is and again, it's a class problem. There's this culture now of people eating at separate times in separate rooms with separate screens, and that's always going to lead to convenience food to food of poor nutritional value, and to there being no sort of control of the helping size.
But also, you see kids on their way to school going into the corner shop buying crisps and chocolate, you know, on their way to school, and then on the way back going into McDonald's. Now, you know, if that's deprived, where's the money coming from for that? How come this is?
Don't you think we've allowed big business to take over our national plate, and it's companies that now feed us rather than farmers?
Well, in a way, yes, but
because I remember dinners being quite austere when I was a kid. My mum was a great cook, but you know, it'd be a piece of like a pork chop, a couple of boiled potatoes and peas.
Toad in the hole. Toad in the hole.
Toad in the hole's a classic. Be lucky if you got that. But food was simpler and more real back in the day, wasn't it?
People cooked real food. People don't cook real food.
And what about sugar consumption? I mean, I don't want to age all of us, but I mean, I certainly remember that it was once a week a treat down to go down to the newsagents and buy some penny sweets.
I mean, all this, you know, the fizzy drinks, I think that's really a large part of it. I think that's a huge part of the obesity problem in this country. People consuming crap drinks. Yeah,
even fruit juice. Even fruit juice. It's
full of sugar.
Full of sugar. But people don't know this. It should be. So I disagree with you. There should be a really punitive tax on sugar. Sugar is the new poison.
But I don't think it will work,
alcohol.
because the people against whom that campaign is directed in a way will continue to spend their smaller disposable income on poor quality food because it tastes better and it's easier. There could well be a case for legislation to mandate that there should not be a level of sugar above a certain percentage of the nutrition in food. Perhaps that's a debate to have, because I think what's not realised is how much sugar is in savoury food. You know, things like Pringles or hamburgers. The reason that, in many ways, that they taste so good is because they're packed with sugar.
But then there's the salt as well, and there's a vast high salt quantity, which leads to all sorts of problems, high blood pressure, etc. But the thing is, people need an example. Look at our Prime Minister. I mean, I looked at him on the news amongst all the other G7 people. He was the only one that, not just the fact that he, you know, jacket was undone, looked a complete mess. That's always his way. But looking at him, he is overweight. He said it himself.
But the interesting thing
as
about
he said
Boris
himself after COVID.
Yeah.
The reason he suffered so
the old
badly
crash diet's not going that well. He said he was as fit as a butcher's dog.
But Boris has always jogged and he's always ran and he's always like had on his, you know, ran in.
A pig, then.
Yeah, no, exactly that. It just shows how little exercise. How little good exercise does. If you're eating at midnight or you're knocking back the GNC or all that stuff, you know.
Well, in Boris's case, it's because he's got a great fondness for cheese at midnight, apparently.
It's not the only thing he likes at midnight.
I didn't lose weight. In my sort of 30s, I put on a lot of weight. I went up to 13 stone, which for my height is not good. I've been on television 13 stone, and even that didn't bring me down. But eventually, I lost weight because I discovered exercise. You know, Jane Fonda's exercise video, and I did that, and then I had got the courage to go out to exercise classes and then to move, and I've kept all that weight off in all the decades since then. But without the exercise, I didn't lose weight. It's the combination of the two.
And I think the lack of social stigma around obesity, because as Tony and I both said, it's now 2 generations in. If you don't have the stigma that to be fat is a bad thing, why would you not be fat if it's an easy way to live? If you don't see or experience any health problems until you're far into middle age.
Would you eat a seagull? Because that's our next story. Apparently, Venice's 5-star hotels are now bestowing guests with handheld water pistols to fend for themselves in outdoor seating areas. The so-called sky rats are out in full force and apparently have been violently stealing hotel guests' food. Now, I'm not joking. Look at the power in that pistol. I mean, that is packing some heat. So what do we think? Have you had any run-ins with pigeons, seagulls, rats?
Pigeons, certainly. We had there was a leak in the guttering on the top of the house, and there was a hole came in, and then the pigeons started, and they went right into the sort of the loft area, and to get them out was an absolute nightmare. Scaffolding, rebuilding.
Well, they destroy roofs. They peck their way in, don't they? They're relentless.
They are. But anyway, it's all sorted now.
Oh, good. Yeah, and they make this disconcerting sound, don't they?
Yeah, I was attacked by a wild deer in Nara once, the ancient capital of Japan, where the wild deer roamed free in the streets. And they were very, very aggressive. But I went back a few years ago, and Chinese tourists had arrived, and they were feeding the fed the wild deer of Nara with lots of nuts and cheap, salty, sweet snacks, and so that they could pose with their arm around the deer. So the deer of Nara have got an obesity problem now and don't mug anybody anymore.
Yeah, apparently the rats in New York have diabetes from eating Western food, which I think is very telling, isn't it? Have you had any run-ins with nature, David?
Well,
seagulls... Are you at one with nature? Are you like Dr. Dolittle? Do you talk to the animals?
I wish I could. No, it would make life much easier with my dog. No, I've never really had run-ins with seagulls, but I have been chased through a field by a herd of cows while doing a charity walk in Leicestershire.
They're not as docile as they look,
No,
are they?
they're terrifying. When you've got 24 cows running towards you at 10 o'clock at night and you can barely see more than 6 feet, it's not the most pleasant experience.
I was brought up in South Africa, and
blimey!
You'd think there'd be stories of snakes and nothing. My other half was Australian, so we spent time in Australia. Nothing. So 3 years ago, we were flown to New York for me to do a television programme about a teen idol called David Cassidy, way before your time. And I was very pleased with myself because we were having 5 days in New York. Woke up in the morning, the first morning, it was a beautiful sunny day. We were going out to brunch at this lovely diner, and we were still on got to Broadway. And I said, you know, the neon lights, on Broadway. And at that point, a pigeon just deposited its lunch, breakfast and dinner right on my head. I mean,
You thought it wasn't that bad, yeah.
Oh, it was,
Was it lucky? It's supposed to be.
I don't know. I had to go home and wash my hair.
Well, I've had big problems in South Africa with baboons.
Oh, they're vicious.
They're vicious because the baboon is a small, cute monkey, but the issue is that they have the strength of 4 men. They're very powerful. They can climb a tree in 3 seconds. And I was in a nature reserve with my wife and brand new son. He was about a year old. And I popped out of the car to get a closer photograph, a better, closer-up shot of a baboon. And then my wife was screaming. A different baboon had jumped through an open window in the car and was just sat there in the car with my wife and the new baby. Not interested in the wife or the baby, but the bananas and the other snacks that we had. But we couldn't get this thing out. And I managed to rescue my son, and my good lady wife, she got out as well. But we couldn't get this baboon out. And then luckily a park ranger came along with a pole, and he sort of poked him out. And he said that these creatures are so clever that if you're not wearing a uniform, they'll ignore you. They know the difference between a security guard and a civilian.
The guy with a pole. The guy with a banana.
A banana, and exactly. The idiot with the banana, story of my life. And yeah, they're very clever. And what we saw them doing later is they get onto cars and they can actually open car doors with their hands. They found a way of doing that. So basically, have respect for nature.
Yep, exactly. And, don't leave your car windows open when you're in a game reserve. No.
Oh, blimey. We won't be doing that one again. Apologies, Mrs. Dolan and young son. Lots more to come. At the end of the show, a homage to Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather, which is 50 years old this weekend. We're going to play a game of Gang Gang style. Find out about that shortly.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
What a busy show. Thank you so much for your company. I'll get some more of your emails when I get a chance because lots and lots of opinions coming in. Let's get to a quick comment on overweight children. Short one from Tanya, who says, "Dear Mark, I used to walk to school 2.5 miles. Fair point. Well, it's time now for the Great British Game Show, which today is called Gang Gang Style. Yesterday marked the 50th anniversary of the release of Francis Ford Coppola's cinematic masterpiece, The Godfather, which has gone on to inspire countless other gangster films and TV series. But how well do my panel and you at home know they're on-screen gangsters from TV and from the movies? Let's play Gang Gang Style, and let's start with this particular character. Who is this gangster? Can you name him? And can you name the movie?
Tony Montana.
Right.
Say hello to my little friend, Scarface.
Scarface, that's right. A point for the gangster and a point for the TV show or movie. That was Tony Montana and Scarface. How about our next baddie? Who could that be? Now, that's a less well-known character from a Tarantino movie, an early classic from Tarantino. What was his breakout hit?
Reservoir Dogs.
Reservoir Dogs. And this is Joe Cabot. Do you remember Joe Cabot?
I don't remember Joe Cabot, no.
This quiz is completely slanted against me because it's all gangsters and violence and blood and guts and boys stuff.
I know, it's rubbish. We should have done a bit of showbiz as well. How about this one, though? I'm sure you've seen this movie. This is a classic gangster movie.
Oh, well, that's Goodfellas.
David, Goodfellas. And do you know the name of that character?
No idea.
Henry Hill.
Henry Hill.
Oh, dear, we've lost Nina at this point.
Absolutely.
OK, well, this is a BBC classic. Who's this baddie?
Oh, Tommy Shelby from
That's right.
Peaky Blinders.
Peaky Blinders, an absolute classic.
Too violent for me.
Oh, gosh, you think so? It is pretty violent, isn't it? How about this one? Another classic, a US classic this time.
Oh, there's Gangs of New York.
Gangs of New York.
I cannot remember the...
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Daniel Day-Lewis, but the character's name.
Nina, when you go shopping, you go to the greengrocer, you go to the fishmonger. Where else would you go?
Baker.
Yes. What about if you fancied a steak? Where would you go?
Go to a butcher.
All right, you get half a point. Bill the butcher. That'll do it. Although
Thank you so much.
I wouldn't go to his particular establishment if I were you. How about this one? Everyone knows this one. Who is this man? Nina, come on.
No, I know I do.
Oh, you've got to know who this is.
That's the greatest. This is the greatest TV show ever made.
I know it's The Sopranos. But,
Bingo.
But I.
And then what's the lead character in The Sopranos?
No
what might
idea.
he be called?
Tony somebody.
No, we are.
No.
You're nearly there.
Tony.
The clue's in the title.
I'd rather have Tony Monero from Saturday Night Fever.
I'm going to give you the points. It's Tony Soprano from The Sopranos. You're better than you thought. How about this one? This is a challenge, but do you know which particular baddie this is?
Is that the Italian? Gomorrah.
It is Gomorrah. Well done. And it's Ciro l'Immortale. That's right. How about this one? We're back to Tarantino, folks. David.
Pulp Fiction.
Yes.
And he's just about to talk about Ezekiel, but the character's name again escapes me.
It's so hard, isn't it? We know it's Samuel L. Jackson, but it's Jules Winfield. Yeah, there you go. That's one for the superfans. Just two more to go. Let's have a look at our penultimate offering. Now, this is a relatively new gangster drama.
Oh, it's The Gentleman.
The Gentleman. And who's he?
Oh, Matthew McConaughey, but who is playing again? I have no idea about the
It is
name.
Michael Mickey Pearson. And let's end with another classic, another iconic baddie.
Oh.
Robert De Niro.
That's Al Capone in
Al
The
Capone.
Untouchable.
Bingo. An absolute
Great
classic. And there you go. Well, I think the points go to Tony, with David in second place and the wonderful Nina in
I'm
close third.
thrilled to be last. I
nailed it.
Thrilled. I don't care about any of these. But
You have absolutely nailed it. Look, it's funny, isn't it? Why do we like these on-screen villains so much, David? Why are they so alluring?
Because it allows us, to some degree, to live the sort of life that we would never want to or dare to live vicariously through them. And how wonderful it would be, in a way, to be Tony Soprano, to be untrammeled by questions of morality is to be rich, but also how truly dreadful, as we find out at the end, it is.
Well, yeah. I mean, listen, Tony, you've written about some baddies in your books.
I have, and I think the thing about Tony Soprano and why that's the greatest TV show ever made is because it's all that living vicariously and doing things that we can't do and punishing our enemies and all that. But he also has all these other problems with his children and with his parents and with his workmates and his colleagues. And there's a great scene where the takeaway guy delivers the wrong food and he goes absolutely crazy. And his wife said, "We'll just call him up and get him to deliver it again." And he says, "But then it's everything else is cold," and it just reminds me of conversations that I have with my wife when Deliveroo.
But that's men behaving like small children, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it's men behaving like the head of the family, trying to get the Chinese takeaway ordered.
I find it very odd. I mean, and as I say, the violence just doesn't appeal to me. So.
OK, well, men behaving in a very immature way is certainly a theme that's been perennial in my life. I want to thank you so much for your time tonight. What an amazing panel. Do come back and see us soon. Fascinating conversation. And we'll catch up with you tomorrow. I'm back in the hot seat at 9. But stick around because I'll be presenting headliners in 2 minutes.
Hello again, I'm Luke Mile with your forecast and plenty of dry, warm and sunny weather to come as we go into this weekend. If you like it dry and warm, as I say, we've got plenty of it to come. High pressure in charge of our weather, which means the weather's not moving very quickly. It's staying fairly stable and there's not much winds around with those isobars few and far between across the map. So it stays settled. Aside from a weather front just affecting the far north of Scotland, that'll bring some cloud and outbreaks of rain to Shetland over the next 12 to 24 hours. But away from that, through Saturday into the early hours, that is, we'll see plenty of clear skies. So a chilly start to the day. Temperatures dropping down to 1s and 2s, so there will be a touch of frost, I think, first thing. 1 or 2 mist or fog patches as well. But we are compensated with a lot of blue skies to wake up the day with and plenty of sunshine lasting throughout for most places. We will see a bit more cloud around the west of Scotland and across the Northern Isles and the far northeast of Scotland too. A little bit of fair weather cloud may bubble up elsewhere, particularly over the Pennines, but for the vast majority, it once again will be a warm and sunny afternoon. 19 degrees the top temperature, could even get close to 20 in a few places. The average for this time of year is around 12 or 13 degrees. Through Saturday evening then, a lot of fine weather to end the day. Few bits and pieces of cloud melting away and it stays dry and clear, but we will start to see more cloud drifting in off the North Sea. Low cloud at that, so misty and murky conditions developing for eastern Scotland, eastern England, East Anglia and the southeast of England as well. A bit more of a breeze in the southeast will make it feel that bit cooler as well. And that low cloud just drifts its way a little bit further westwards as we go through the day on Sunday. So a different picture for some central and eastern areas of the country. A lot more cloud around, feeling colder than it has done of late. Further towards the west is where we'll see the best chance of that sunshine and those higher temperatures. But it stays dry with some sunshine into next week. Cooler by Tuesday. Bye-bye.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on